Tea started like every ordinary night flight. A quiet cabin. Sleeping passengers. But 20 minutes after takeoff, the captain's voice shattered the calm with a trembling announcement no traveler ever expects. Ladies and gentlemen, if there is any trained fighter pilot on board, please come forward immediately. Gasps broke the silence. Heads whipped around. Children began to cry. 100 hearts pounded as one terrifying question filled the air. Why would a commercial pilot beg for a fighter pilot in the middle of a routine flight? No one knew it yet, but 2 young black twin sisters, peacefully sleeping in row 14, were about to be thrust into a night of danger, hidden power, and a decision that could decide the fate of everyone on board. Before we go any further, pause for just a second. If you believe stories of unexpected courage deserve to be heard, hit subscribe right now and tap the notification bell. It costs nothing, but it helps powerful stories like this reach the people who need them most. And when you're done, share this video with someone you care about, because what happens next is something no passenger, no crew member, and certainly not these sleeping sisters will ever forget. The plane shuddered again, a low vibration that crawled beneath the seats. Passengers clutched their armrests. The captain repeated the call, his voice sharper, almost pleading. Any fighter pilot, please signal the crew now. In row 14, Maya's eyelids fluttered. Her twin, Lena, stirred but didn't wake. They had boarded this flight to escape a long week, to sink into a few hours of peaceful sleep. Instead, the sky had chosen them for a night that would test everything they thought they knew about courage and about themselves. A ripple of panic moved through the cabin like a silent wave. Seatbelts clicked. Phones lit up with frantic fingers, though no signal could escape 35,000 feet. A baby began to cry 2 rows back, the sound sharp against the low hum of the engines. Maya blinked herself awake, the captain's words still echoing in her mind. Fighter pilot? For a moment she thought she was dreaming. But the alarm in the crew's eyes as they rushed up and down the aisle told her this was no nightmare. Something was wrong. Terribly wrong. Beside her, Lena shifted under her blanket, still half asleep. Maya? What's happening? She mumbled, rubbing her eyes. Sure, Maya whispered, forcing calm into her voice even as her pulse hammered in her ears. Stay still for now. Just listen. Another jolt shivered through the plane, stronger this time, rattling the overhead bins. Gasps burst from passengers as plastic latches quivered and a coffee cup toppled to the floor. Somewhere toward the front, a woman stifled a sob. The intercom crackled again, the captain's voice tighter, faster, stripped of the smooth assurance every traveler expects. Ladies and gentlemen, remain seated and keep your seatbelts fastened. If there is any trained fighter pilot on board, please signal the crew immediately. This is a critical request. Critical. The word hung in the air like static. Passengers glanced at one another, searching for answers in strangers' faces. No one moved. No one dared. Maya scanned the cabin. Businessmen clutched briefcases to their chests. A teenager gripped his gaming console as if it could save him. Every pair of eyes flicked toward the aisle, waiting for a hero to appear. But no hero came. Lena sat upright now, fully awake. Why would he need a fighter pilot? We're on a passenger plane, she whispered, voice trembling. I don't know, Maya admitted. And that frightened her more than anything. Her sister's steady confidence had always been her anchor. Seeing fear in Lena's eyes made the danger feel suddenly real. A flight attendant appeared, moving quickly but trying to mask the urgency in her steps. Her smile was tight, the kind meant to calm children before a shot. Ladies and gentlemen, everything is under control, she said, though her voice betrayed a thin quiver. Please remain seated and keep the aisles clear. But everything was not under control. The slight tilt of the floor told Maya the plane was banking hard. Outside the window, the night sky looked impossibly black, as if the stars themselves were holding their breath. Maya reached for Lena's hand. Whatever's happening, we stay together, she said quietly. Lena squeezed back, a silent promise passing between them. Somewhere near the cockpit, a man finally stood, a tall passenger with the broad shoulders of someone accustomed to command. All eyes followed as he stepped into the aisle, hesitated, and then slowly sat back down. He wasn't a fighter pilot. Just a man wrestling with the same helpless fear as everyone else. The captain's voice returned, softer now but edged with something that chilled the blood, urgency wrapped in barely controlled fear. If anyone aboard has advanced flight training of any kind, please signal a member of the crew. We are experiencing a systems failure and require immediate assistance. A systems failure. Those two words were enough to turn unease into dread. Passengers clutched each other. A child began to pray aloud. Maya's mind raced. A fighter pilot. Advanced flight training. Why those words? Unless the crew feared something far more dangerous than turbulence or a simple mechanical glitch. She looked at Lena, whose breathing had gone shallow. Something in Maya's gut told her the night was about to demand more from them than either had ever imagined. The engines roared as the plane climbed through thickening clouds, but inside, the silence was deafening, broken only by the heartbeat of fear pulsing through every row. And in that fragile, trembling cabin, no one, not even the sleeping twins who would soon awaken to their own hidden strength, could predict how this night in the sky would change them all. If you're still watching, take one small action right now. Stories like this, where ordinary lives collide with extraordinary moments, remind us how fragile and powerful a single night can be. Tap subscribe, hit like, and share this video so more people can witness the courage that can rise from unexpected places. Your support keeps these untold stories alive. The cabin felt heavier, as if the very air had thickened. Every creak of the fuselage now sounded like a warning. 100 unspoken fears floated between strangers who had become unwilling allies in a mystery at 35,000 feet. Maya's senses sharpened. The whir of the air vents. The faint vibration beneath her shoes. The smell of warm metal and stale coffee. Each detail pressed into her mind as though her body knew what her thoughts could not. Something is coming. Across the aisle, a young mother tightened her grip on a sleeping toddler. A businessman closed his laptop and whispered a prayer. The flight attendant who had smiled moments ago now stood frozen near the galley, clutching the back of a seat for balance. Her knuckles were white. The intercom buzzed again, then died in a harsh pop. A collective gasp swept the cabin. For one terrifying heartbeat, only the engine's distant growl remained. Lena's hand trembled inside Maya's. "Why isn't he saying anything?" she whispered. Maya leaned closer. Maybe he's trying to fix it. But she didn't believe her own words. Suddenly, the plane dipped. Not a gentle sway, this was a stomach-dropping plunge that sent drinks splashing and hearts racing. Passengers cried out. A suitcase tumbled from the overhead bin, barely missing a passenger's head. The seatbelt sign blazed red. Then, silence again. The engine steadied, but the dread only deepened. It was the kind of quiet that doesn't comfort, it warns. Far up the aisle, the cockpit door opened for the briefest second. Maya caught a flash of the captain's face. Sweating. A man trained to project calm now carried the look of someone staring into the unknown. Behind him, a co-pilot held a tablet glowing with frantic alerts. The door snapped shut. Maya's heart pounded against her ribs. She'd always believed pilots were unshakable. If they looked scared, it meant the sky itself had turned against them. Why would they need a fighter pilot? Lena asked again, her voice breaking. They fly jets, not planes like this. Maya thought of her father, a mechanic who taught her to listen to machines. Engines have a language, he'd say. When something's wrong, they tell you, if you know how to listen. Right now, the plane's steady hum sounded too perfect. Too controlled. Like a whisper masking a scream. A sudden metallic clank rattled the cabin. The lights flickered. Gasps erupted, sharp and jagged. The captain's voice returned, low and urgent. "Ladies and gentlemen, remain calm. We are coordinating with ground control. All trained pilots or individuals with advanced aviation experience, please, signal the crew now." The words advanced aviation experience sent a shiver down Maya's spine. This wasn't a routine emergency. This was a plea. Passengers turned in their seats, scanning faces, hoping, praying, for someone to stand. Still, no one moved. A man 2 rows ahead half rose, then shook his head and sat again. A woman clutched a rosary until her fingers bled white. Maya's pulse thundered. She wanted to believe someone, anyone, had the skill to save them. But the silence said otherwise. Suddenly, a faint beeping echoed from somewhere below their feet. Slow, steady, like a countdown. Lena squeezed Maya's hand so tightly it hurt. Maya, what if? Don't, Maya cut in, her voice sharper than intended. She forced a shaky smile. We're going to be okay. But in her chest, fear bloomed like ice. The twins sat together, 2 figures against the endless dark, their lives balanced between sky and earth, between ordinary and unimaginable. And though neither knew it yet, the night was about to demand a choice that would test the limits of courage, loyalty, and the bond that tied them together. The hum of the engines deepened, a sound that should have been reassuring, but tonight it carried a weight that pressed into every chest. Outside the oval windows, the sky stretched endless and black, a void where the moonlight should have been. It felt as though the plane was slicing through an ocean of darkness, a fragile speck adrift in a sea of nothing. Maya's eyes darted to the seatback screen in front of her. The flight map flickered with static, then froze completely. The little plane icon, once inching steadily west, now hovered motionless over a featureless patch of sky. A murmur of fear swept through the cabin. From somewhere behind them came the sharp crack of a soda can bursting open. A child whimpered. The air smelled faintly of ozone, a metallic tang that didn't belong. Lena gripped the armrest. Something's wrong with the navigation, she whispered. Maya tried to steady her breathing. It could just be turbulence. Maybe the system needs to reset. But her voice betrayed her. The words felt hollow even as she spoke them. The captain's voice returned, lower now, almost a whisper through the static. Ladies and gentlemen, please remain calm. We are experiencing a temporary systems interruption. We are in full contact with ground control. Temporary. It was a comforting word, but the tremor in his tone betrayed the truth. He was holding something back. A passenger across the aisle, an older man in a faded Air Force cap, suddenly rose to his feet. I'm a retired pilot, he said, voice firm but calm. I can help. All eyes snapped toward him. A flight attendant rushed forward. Sir, please sit down until the captain requests assistance. The man hesitated, then slowly lowered himself back into his seat. But the flash of defiance in his eyes gave Maya a flicker of hope. Someone here knew the sky. Another metallic ping sounded from beneath the floorboards, slow, deliberate, like a warning bell. This time the vibrations followed, a steady pulse beneath their feet. Lena leaned closer. It feels like something's changing speed. Maya nodded. Her father's lessons came flooding back. Engines don't lie. The pitch had shifted, just enough to tell her the captain was fighting the controls. A sudden flash of white lit the windows. Lightning. The cabin erupted in startled cries as the storm revealed itself, an endless wall of clouds flashing with violent light. For the first time all night, Maya saw the fear in her sister's eyes reflected in her own. The intercom crackled again, this time with a burst of static so loud passengers flinched. Cabin crew to the cockpit. Immediate assistance required. The line went dead. The lead flight attendant hurried forward, her professional mask gone. Her stride was quick, sharp, urgent. The curtain to the cockpit swayed closed behind her like a stage hiding the next act of a tragedy. The passengers' whispers turned into a low rumble of dread. People were no longer strangers. They were united in a single thought. We are in danger. Maya looked down at her hands and realized she was still holding Lena's. Her sister's grip was iron. Neither of them spoke. There were no words left. They were caught between fear and faith, between silence and the unknown. Whatever was happening behind that cockpit door, it was bigger than a simple storm. And somewhere in the shadows of the night sky, an unseen force waited for its next move. The curtain to the cockpit rustled once, then stilled. Not a sound came from behind it. The silence was so sharp it felt alive, crawling over the passenger's skin like static electricity. Maya's heart hammered against her ribs. Every second that passed without an update only deepened the sense that something inside that cockpit was terribly wrong. The intercom came alive with a soft hiss. Everyone froze. "This is your captain," the voice finally said. We're experiencing a critical systems malfunction. If there is any licensed pilot or military fighter pilot on board, please make yourself known to the crew immediately." The words sliced through the cabin like a blade. A collective gasp rippled through the passengers. This wasn't turbulence. This wasn't a simple technical issue. The captain's request was clear: they might not be able to land this plane alone. Maya's breath caught. Her father's old stories of emergency landings flashed through her mind, of pilots fighting gravity with nothing but instinct and a prayer. But this wasn't a story. This was real. And the fear in the captain's trembling voice told her the situation was far worse than anyone wanted to admit. Beside her, Lena gripped the armrest so tightly her knuckles blanched white. "What does that mean?" she whispered. "Why would they need a fighter pilot?" Maya swallowed hard. "It means something up there isn't responding. And if the controls are gone..." She didn't finish. She didn't need to. The rest of the passengers were already imagining the same nightmare. A tall man in a navy blue jacket suddenly stood 2 rows ahead. His presence was quiet but commanding, like someone used to danger. He raised his hand halfway, hesitating as though weighing an invisible decision. Then he stepped into the aisle. "I'm a former Air Force pilot," he said firmly, voice carrying over the tense cabin. "Tell the captain I'm coming forward." A flight attendant rushed to him, eyes wide with a mix of relief and fear. "Please follow me, sir," she said, motioning toward the cockpit. Her professional calm barely masked the panic flickering behind her eyes. All around, passengers turned to watch him pass, their gazes clinging to him as if he were the last lifeline in the dark. Maya's mind raced. If a fighter pilot was needed, this wasn't just a systems glitch. Something, or someone, had changed the stakes of this flight. She felt the weight of every heartbeat, the tremble of every engine note. Each sound carried a question she couldn't answer. Would they survive the night? Lena's voice broke through the fog. "Maya, if something happens, you stay calm for me. Promise." Maya squeezed her sister's hand. "I promise." But inside, her own fear burned hotter than she'd ever known. The cabin was silent enough to hear a single heartbeat. Every passenger leaned toward the front, eyes fixed on the cockpit curtain where the retired fighter pilot had just disappeared. Behind that thin fabric barrier, life and death were being decided in whispers and switches. A faint clunk echoed through the fuselage, metal against metal. The sound wasn't loud, but it carried an unmistakable urgency, like the closing of a vault door. Several passengers flinched, their heads snapping toward the source. Then came a low rumble beneath their feet, a vibration that wasn't part of the steady engine rhythm. Lena clutched Maya's arm. "What is that?" she whispered. "It's not turbulence, is it?" Maya's mind raced, memories of her father's flying lessons flashing like warning lights. "No," she said softly. "That's something else." She felt the change before she heard it. The engines weren't pulling evenly. One side was fighting harder, like a runner dragging an injured leg. The intercom hissed again. Static. Then a muffled voice. "Cabin crew, secure all compartments. Brace for potential rapid descent." A collective gasp spread through the passengers like an electrical surge. The phrase rapid descent carried a weight no one wanted to acknowledge. It wasn't just technical. It meant danger. Immediate. Unforgiving. A baby began to cry 3 rows back, the sound sharp and aching in the tense air. Its mother tried to soothe it, her own trembling hands betraying the calm mask on her face. The lead flight attendant appeared, walking the aisle with hurried steps. Her voice was firm but gentle. "Please remain seated and fasten your seatbelt securely. This is just a precaution." But her eyes, wide, unblinking, told a different story. Maya's own fear pressed hard against her chest. The oxygen masks above their heads felt like silent promises, waiting to drop, waiting to signal that the situation had crossed an invisible line. She turned to Lena, her voice low. "Remember Dad's rule? Trust the crew. They're trained for this." Lena nodded weakly, but her eyes stayed locked on the cockpit door. Trust was hard when the people in charge were hidden behind silence. A sudden roar of wind rattled the windows, making the plane shudder violently. Passengers yelped and grabbed for armrests. Overhead bins creaked as if straining against the pressure. The dim cabin lights flickered once, twice, before settling into a weak, amber glow. The smell of burning metal, faint but undeniable, drifted through the air vents. Someone shouted, "Smoke! I smell smoke!" Another voice followed, tight with panic. "Are we losing an engine?" Chaos trembled on the edge of eruption. Then, the curtain at the cockpit jerked open. The fighter pilot emerged, face pale, jaw tight. He didn't look at anyone as he strode to the flight attendant and whispered something urgent. Her hand shot to her mouth. She nodded sharply, then disappeared behind the door again. The pilot turned to the passengers, eyes scanning the sea of terrified faces. His voice was steady, but the tension beneath it was unmistakable. "We need everyone calm. This aircraft can still be landed safely. But we need absolute cooperation. Do not panic." His words were meant to comfort. Instead, they confirmed every unspoken fear. Maya held Lena's trembling hand tighter, her own mind screaming questions with no answers. Was the plane losing power? Were they trapped in a storm with no way out? Or was something worse, something unseen, happening inside that cockpit? Every second stretched like an eternity, each breath a fragile prayer. The night sky outside offered no comfort, only endless darkness. And deep down, Maya felt the truth settle like ice. Whatever came next, nothing about this flight would ever be the same. The fighter pilot's warning lingered in the air like a storm cloud. Passengers clung to every word, but his calm assurance couldn't erase the fear pulsing through the cabin. The engines groaned again, deeper this time, an unsettling metallic moan that made the overhead bins rattle and the window frames tremble. Maya tightened her grip on Lena's hand. She could feel her sister's pulse racing, a frantic rhythm that matched her own. Across the aisle, a toddler whimpered softly while his mother rocked him with a trembling arm. The quiet sounds of human fear, sniffles, prayers, whispered reassurances, filled the cabin like an invisible fog. A sudden ding pierced the silence. The captain's voice returned, clipped and strained. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is your captain. We are preparing for a controlled descent. Please remain seated, fasten your seatbelts, and follow all crew instructions." Controlled descent. The words were careful, too careful. Maya heard what wasn't being said, something critical was failing, and they needed to lose altitude fast. The fighter pilot reappeared, his expression a tight mask of determination. He leaned toward the lead flight attendant and whispered something urgent. She nodded sharply, then addressed the passengers. "Everyone, place your seats upright and stow your belongings. Remain calm. This is just a precautionary measure." But her voice betrayed a slight tremor, the kind that carries the truth behind a polished smile. The plane tilted forward. It wasn't steep, but enough for stomachs to drop and hearts to pound. Loose items slid across tray tables. A coffee cup tumbled to the floor, its contents splashing across the aisle like a warning. Outside the window, clouds swirled violently, lightning illuminating the endless black. The storm seemed alive now, rolling, twisting, pressing closer as if determined to swallow the fragile aircraft whole. Lena's voice broke the tension. "Maya, what if we don't?" She couldn't finish. Maya turned to her sister, meeting her wide, terrified eyes. "We will," she said firmly, even as doubt clawed at her chest. "We will." Then came a sound Maya would never forget. The sharp hiss of decompression. The cabin lights flickered wildly as oxygen masks dropped from the ceiling with a mechanical snap. Screams erupted instantly. Passengers grabbed for the dangling masks, fumbling to secure them over their faces. The flight attendants shouted instructions, their voices barely audible over the rising roar of wind and panic. Maya forced her mask over her mouth and nose, then reached for Lena's trembling hands to help her secure hers. The elastic straps snapped into place just as the plane lurched violently, tossing passengers against their seatbelts. Her ears popped painfully as the pressure shifted, the sound of rushing air filling every corner of the cabin. Somewhere near the back, a baby wailed, the piercing cry cutting through the chaos. Through it all, Maya's thoughts raced. This isn't just a storm. Something is wrong with the plane itself. Her father's voice echoed in her memory. Altitude is life. Lose altitude, lose time. The descent wasn't just controlled anymore. It was urgent. Desperate. She turned toward the cockpit curtain, now swaying violently with each jolt. Behind it, strangers fought to save their lives. But out here in the cabin, every passenger could only sit, breathe, and hope. The fighter pilot emerged once more, gripping the overhead rail to steady himself against the trembling aircraft. His eyes swept the cabin with quiet authority. "We have a plan," he said loudly, projecting calm over the panic. "The crew is doing everything possible to land safely. Keep your masks on and remain seated. We're going to get through this." His words were steady, but Maya noticed the subtle flicker in his gaze, the same silent fear she felt burning in her own chest. The oxygen masks hissed with each breath, a steady rhythm against the chaos. Passengers clung to their armrests, their eyes wide with a mixture of terror and fragile hope. The cabin lights flickered again, briefly plunging everyone into a shadowed half-light where fear seemed to grow teeth. Maya tightened her grip on the seat in front of her. Through the mask, each breath felt thin, metallic, like inhaling the edge of panic itself. Beside her, Lena's eyes darted toward the cockpit curtain, as if staring hard enough could somehow reveal what was happening beyond it. The plane shuddered again, harder this time. Loose trays rattled. A bottle rolled noisily down the aisle before being stopped by a passenger's foot. Every sound became magnified, every vibration a possible sign that the descent was spinning beyond control. From the front of the cabin came a sudden beep beep beep, a sound like an alarm struggling to be heard over the roar of rushing air. The fighter pilot was back, this time gripping the intercom phone in one hand and bracing himself against a seat with the other. His voice, calm but commanding, filled the cabin. "Everyone listen carefully. We are dropping altitude to stabilize the cabin pressure. Keep your masks on and stay seated. The captain and crew are fully in control." But Maya caught the smallest crack in his tone, a faint edge of urgency that betrayed what the words tried to hide. They were not fully in control. Not yet. A child began to cry in the row behind them, the sound rising into frantic sobs. The mother struggled to calm her little boy while keeping her own mask secure. Across the aisle, an elderly man whispered a prayer, his voice steady despite the tremor in his hands. The prayers soon spread, a soft chorus of different languages and faiths, all blending into one desperate plea for survival. Maya felt Lena squeeze her hand hard. The pressure was almost painful, but Maya welcomed it. It anchored her to something real, something alive, when everything else felt like a bad dream tumbling through the night sky. The fighter pilot moved methodically down the aisle, checking masks and offering quiet words of reassurance to panicked passengers. When he reached their row, he crouched low, meeting Maya's eyes with an intensity that made her heart race. "You're doing great," he said, his voice low but firm. "We're almost through the worst of it. Stay calm and keep breathing." Maya wanted to ask 1,000 questions. What's wrong with the plane? How close are we to the ground? But his steady gaze told her everything she needed to know. Information could wait. Survival came first. Then, another sound, one that made every muscle in Maya's body tense. A faint metallic ping echoed from somewhere beneath the floor, followed by a vibration that pulsed through the soles of her shoes. The fighter pilot froze mid-step, his head tilting slightly as if listening for something only he could interpret. He turned toward the cockpit curtain, eyes narrowing. Without another word, he moved swiftly forward, disappearing behind the heavy fabric. The moment he vanished, the cabin seemed to inhale with him, the passengers holding their collective breath. Every second stretched painfully, the roar of the engines now a constant reminder of how fragile their situation was. Outside, lightning flashed so close it illuminated the cabin in stark, ghostly light. For a split second, Maya could see the fear etched into every face, wide eyes, clenched jaws, silent prayers written in trembling expressions. The plane dipped again, sharp enough to send a tray clattering to the floor. Gasps and muffled screams followed. Maya instinctively wrapped her arm around Lena, shielding her as best she could. Then came the captain's voice, steadier now, but still heavy with urgency. "Ladies and gentlemen, we have initiated emergency procedures. Please remain seated and trust the crew. We are working to land as soon as possible." Emergency procedures. The words sliced through Maya's thoughts like ice. This wasn't just turbulence anymore. This was survival. The captain's announcement left a ringing silence in its wake. For a heartbeat, the only sound was the hiss of oxygen masks and the relentless thrum of engines fighting gravity. Every passenger sat frozen, as if a single movement might tip the fragile balance keeping them alive. Maya's chest tightened, her breaths sharp against the rubbery mask. Her mind churned with possibilities: hydraulics failure, engine loss, a lightning strike, each one more terrifying than the last. Lena's trembling hand found hers again, their fingers locking together like a lifeline. The plane jolted violently, sending a wave of startled cries through the cabin. Overhead bins rattled, a few popping open to release a cascade of belongings: jackets, books, even a rolling carry-on that thudded down the aisle. A flight attendant rushed forward to secure it, her movements swift but eyes betraying barely contained fear. Then came a sudden flash outside the window, lightning, blinding and impossibly close. The glow illuminated the clouds in an eerie silver, casting every passenger in a pale, ghost-like light. Maya flinched, instinctively turning away, but the afterimage burned into her eyes. It wasn't just a storm. It was a wall of chaos, pressing against the fragile skin of the aircraft. The engines roared louder as the descent steepened. The fighter pilot's voice broke through the intercom once more, steady but commanding. "We are preparing for a rapid landing. Keep masks secured and remain seated. We are trained for this, trust the process." "Trained for this" sounded reassuring, but Maya caught the tension beneath the words. This wasn't a drill. This was real. The pilot stepped back into the cabin, moving quickly from row to row. His presence carried an unspoken message: we're not giving up. When he reached Maya and Lena, he paused just long enough to meet their eyes. "Stay with me," he said quietly, his voice somehow cutting through the roar. "You're stronger than you think." Maya nodded, her throat too tight to speak. Those words, simple as they were, steadied her more than any technical explanation ever could. Suddenly, a loud bang echoed from beneath the plane, a metallic snap that sent a ripple of panic through the passengers. Someone screamed. Another voice shouted a prayer. The aircraft shuddered violently, dipping to one side before correcting itself with a stomach-dropping lurch. Lena's grip on Maya's hand tightened to the point of pain. "Maya, what was that?" "I don't know," Maya admitted, her own voice shaking. "But we're still flying. That's what matters." She forced herself to look forward, to focus on the narrow aisle instead of the storm outside. Panic was a predator. If she let it, it would consume them before the sky ever could. The captain's voice returned, firm and deliberate. "We are cleared for an emergency landing. Brace positions will be announced shortly. Stay calm. Follow crew instructions exactly." Emergency landing. The final confirmation. They weren't just descending anymore, they were racing the storm to the ground. The flight attendants sprang into action, demonstrating brace positions with mechanical precision despite the tremor in their hands. Passengers mimicked the motions, bending forward, gripping their heads, preparing for an impact none of them could fully imagine. Maya leaned toward Lena, her voice low and steady despite the fear clawing at her chest. "Listen to me. We're going to get through this. Just do what they say." Lena nodded, tears streaking down her cheeks, her mask fogging with each rapid breath. The sisters locked eyes, two hearts beating as one against the uncertainty of the storm. The plane began to vibrate with a new intensity, the sound of rushing air now deafening. Through the window, faint lights flickered far below, tiny dots of civilization cutting through the black night. The ground was closer. The end of this descent, one way or another, was near. If your heart is racing, you're not alone. Every second of this emergency landing will decide their fate. Subscribe now, hit like, and share this story so you don't miss the final moments of this breathtaking journey. Your support keeps this flight and this community strong through every twist and turn. The faint glow of city lights flickered beneath the storm clouds like a distant promise, but to Maya it felt 1,000 miles away. The plane groaned against the heavy wind, shuddering as if the storm itself was pulling it apart. Each vibration rattled through the cabin, making the air seem alive with dread. The lead flight attendant's voice cut through the noise, firm but urgent. "Attention passengers. We are beginning final approach. Please assume the brace position and remain there until we are safely on the ground." A chorus of seatbelts clicked as passengers tightened straps and bent forward. Masks hissed with each breath. The smell of fear, sweat, plastic, and recycled air clung to everything like an invisible fog. Maya pulled Lena close, her cheek pressed against the cool fabric of her sister's jacket. Her heartbeat thundered in her ears, matching the rhythm of the engines. Every instinct screamed to look out the window, to see what awaited them below, but she forced herself to keep her head down. Information wouldn't save them now. Obedience might. A sudden jolt pitched the plane sideways, sending a ripple of gasps and muffled cries through the cabin. The fighter pilot's calm voice returned over the intercom, steady as stone. "Hold your position. You are safe. The crew has control." Maya clung to those words, repeating them in her mind like a prayer. Control. Control. Each repetition was a fragile barrier against the chaos outside. The engines screamed louder as the plane angled downward. Gravity pressed hard against their backs, pinning them to their seats. Loose items, phones, cups, pens, slid forward and clattered against seat rails, small sounds magnified into echoes of danger. Somewhere behind them, a man began to sob. Another voice, steady, resolute, whispered a prayer in a language Maya didn't recognize. The quiet courage of strangers filled the cabin, weaving fear and hope into one trembling tapestry. Lena's fingers dug into Maya's arm. "Maya, I can't breathe." "You can," Maya said firmly, adjusting Lena's oxygen mask with shaking hands. "Slow breaths, in and out, just like Dad taught us." The memory of their father's calm lessons, how to breathe through turbulence, how to trust the science of flight, slid into her mind like a lifeline. She clung to it fiercely, even as the plane shuddered again. Through the small cracks between her bent arms, Maya caught fleeting glimpses of the world outside. A flash of lightning, a streak of rain on the window, the faint grid of city streets flickering closer and closer. The ground was no longer a distant abstraction. It was real. It was near. The captain's voice returned, louder now, every word deliberate. "Brace! Brace! Brace!" The cabin erupted into action. Passengers bent forward, pressing their heads to their knees, arms locked tight around their skulls. The roar of the engines grew deafening, a sound so powerful it felt like it was inside their bones. Maya squeezed her eyes shut. She thought of her childhood backyard, of the smell of summer rain, of every small, safe moment she had ever taken for granted. If this was the end, she wanted her last thought to be of something pure. The plane jolted violently, wheels scraping against something solid. For a split second, silence followed, a terrifying, weightless silence. Then came the screech of tires gripping wet runway, a bone-rattling roar that drowned out every scream. The aircraft bounced once, twice, then steadied. The cabin shook like a living thing, but it was still moving forward, alive. Maya lifted her head just as the fighter pilot's voice came over the intercom, steady but charged with relief. "Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Earth." A single sob broke the silence, followed by another, then a wave of disbelieving laughter and applause that filled the cabin like sunlight breaking through clouds. Lena turned to Maya, her tear-streaked face breaking into a trembling smile. "We made it," she whispered, her voice cracked but certain. Maya nodded, unable to speak. The taste of oxygen, heavy and metallic, had never felt so sweet. The plane finally slowed, its heavy wheels groaning against the slick runway before rolling to a trembling stop. For a long, sacred moment, no one moved. The cabin was filled with nothing but the sound of shallow breathing and the soft hum of cooling engines, proof that life had won. Maya kept her eyes closed, gripping Lena's hands so tightly her knuckles ached. She didn't dare let go, as though loosening her grip might somehow unravel their survival. When she finally opened her eyes, the world inside the cabin looked transformed. Every face, every tear, every stunned smile glowed with the same quiet truth. They were still here. The fighter pilot's voice returned over the intercom, calmer now, though a quiet emotion threaded through his words. "Ladies and gentlemen, you are safe. Please remain seated while we confirm the aircraft is secure. You have shown extraordinary courage tonight." A ripple of soft applause moved through the cabin, hesitant at first, then building like a rising tide. People clapped not just for the pilot, but for each other, for the strangers who whispered prayers, held hands, and shared oxygen masks when fear clawed at their throats. The ride from the airport to the twins' apartment felt like a slow drift through another world. Morning sunlight glinted off glass towers and rain-slicked streets, but inside the taxi, the atmosphere was still and heavy, like the hush after a powerful storm. Maya leaned her head against the window, watching the city blur past. Each flash of light on the glass seemed to echo the flicker of last night's emergency lights. Every sound of tires splashing through puddles carried the ghost of rattling trays and panicked breaths. Her body was safe, but her mind was still strapped into that shaking aircraft. Beside her, Lena sat unusually quiet. No playful teasing. No easy laughter. Her fingers twisted the strap of her bag in slow, nervous loops. Finally, she whispered, "Do you ever think about how close we were?" Maya didn't need to ask what she meant. The answer pulsed between them like a heartbeat. "All night," Maya said softly. "It's like I can still feel the sky breaking around us. And yet, we're here." The taxi turned down a familiar street lined with coffee shops and bakeries. People strolled casually along the sidewalks, sipping lattes, scrolling on phones, completely unaware that two passengers in a passing cab had just stared death in the face. Life carried on. The world moved forward. And yet, for Maya and Lena, everything was different. Inside their apartment, the quiet felt strange. The hum of the refrigerator, the soft click of the heating system, all of it sounded too normal. It was almost insulting after a night of deafening chaos. Lena sank onto the couch, hugging a pillow to her chest. "I keep replaying it," she admitted. The pilot's voice. The way everyone worked together. Even the way strangers held hands. It's like, I can't stop hearing it. Maya sat beside her, brushing a strand of hair from her sister's face. "That's because it mattered," she said gently. "Something like that, it leaves a mark. Not a wound. More like a reminder." "A reminder of what?" "That life isn't guaranteed. That fear is real. But so is courage." Their phones buzzed with endless notifications. Messages from family relieved they were alive. Journalists requesting interviews. Social media mentions climbing into the tens of thousands. Among the chaos, one message stood out. It was from the fighter pilot. "Just checking in. Glad you made it home safe. Remember, survival isn't just luck, it's proof of strength." Lena read the text aloud, her voice trembling. For the first time since landing, a small, genuine smile broke across Maya's face. It wasn't the dramatic heroism of last night, but it was exactly what they needed. Acknowledgement from the man who turned panic into hope. As the evening deepened, the twins curled beneath a single blanket on the couch, the glow of the setting sun painting the room in shades of soft amber. They didn't speak much. They didn't need to. The silence wasn't heavy anymore. It was a quiet agreement to honor what they'd survived. Maya finally whispered, "Promise me something." "What?" Lena asked. "Promise me we'll never let fear decide our lives." "Not after this." Lena squeezed her sister's hand. "Promise." The word lingered in the air like a vow, steady and unbreakable. Night settled over the city like a velvet curtain, quiet but alive with hidden energy. From the balcony of their apartment, Maya and Lena looked out across a skyline glittering with lights. To anyone watching, it was just another evening. But for the twins, it was a night that would forever carry the weight of a second chance. Below them, Traffic rolled steadily along the streets, headlights weaving silver ribbons across the dark. The ordinary rhythm of life pulsed on, unaware that high above, the sky had nearly swallowed a plane whole just hours ago. The thought was staggering. Somewhere out there, planes were taking off, landing, crossing oceans, all with passengers who would never know how fragile their miracle truly was. Lena leaned on the balcony rail, the cool metal grounding her in the present. "I keep thinking," she said softly, "about how different tonight could have been. One wrong move, one missed signal, and none of us, would be here right now." Maya nodded, eyes fixed on the endless horizon. "It's terrifying, but it's also beautiful, because it means every single day we get after this is a gift." The silence between them wasn't empty. It was full of gratitude, thick and alive, like the heartbeat of the world itself. Their phones vibrated again. Another flood of messages. News outlets requesting interviews, airline representatives offering apologies, strangers from across the globe sharing their own stories of survival. One message made Maya pause. It came from a young girl in Detroit. "I was scared to fly before. But after seeing your story, I know I can be brave too. Thank you for showing me that fear doesn't have to win." Tears filled Maya's eyes as she read the words aloud. It wasn't about the headlines anymore. It wasn't about the trending hashtags. It was about this connection. A stranger thousands of miles away finding courage because two sisters refused to let fear define their night. The twins stood side by side, hands clasped, their faces bathed in the golden glow of city lights. They didn't need to speak to understand the promise in the air. To live boldly, to love fiercely, to never forget that survival isn't just luck, it's a call to live on purpose. Maya finally broke the silence, her voice steady but thick with emotion. "We went to sleep on that flight thinking it was just another trip. But we woke up to a new life. A life where fear bows to courage." Lena squeezed her sister's hand and whispered, "And where every day is a chance to choose love over fear." Before you close this story, take a deep breath and remember this truth. Life is unpredictable. Moments of terror can strike without warning. But courage, quiet, unshakable courage, lives in all of us. If Maya and Lena's journey touched your heart, don't let their message stop here. Like this video to show the world that courage matters. Comment your thoughts to share your own story of survival or hope. Subscribe now to join a community that refuses to let fear win. Share this story with someone you love, because you never know who needs the reminder that storms can be survived, and that heroes can be born in silence. Together, we can spread this message farther than any flight could ever reach. The sky may be vast, but so is the power of a story shared.